Okay, so for part 2, I'm going to go ahead and finish 5 through 12. So this is going to take far less time than the first one because I'm not going to be explaining a bunch of the basics on this. So on number 5, we have simplify 12x over 20x to the second power. I'm going to start by taking finding my excluded values, which means I need to take the denominator, 20x squared. That cannot equal 0. I'm going to divide both sides by 20, which means x squared cannot equal 0. When I square root both sides, that's going to mean x cannot equal 0. There's the first part of my answer. X cannot be 0 on this equation. So this time we have 12x. The fraction's a little bit larger numbers. So when we go to factor down 12x, 12 I'm going to factor to 4 times 3, and 4 I'm going to break down to 2 times 2. So when we look at our prime factorization, we have 2, 2, 3, and x. Those were the values that could not be factored down any farther. And again, you didn't have to go with, so just a point of clarification, you don't have to go with 4 times 3. For example, if you broke down 12 to 6 times 2, 6 breaks down to 3 times 2, but we still have 2 2's and a single 3. So it doesn't matter what path you take, you end up with the same answer overall. So on number 5, at the denominator, we had 20x to the second power. So I'm going to factor down 20. I'm just going to go 10 and 2. And then 10 would break down to 5 times 2. And then x squared would be the 2x's. So we have 2 times 2 times 5 times x times x. I'm going to be looking for things that I could divide out of this expression. When it divides out, it's equal to 1, and 1 times anything doesn't change it, and so that's why it's canceling out. So we've got 2 divided by 2 at the beginning would divide out, another 2 divided by 2 would divide out, x divided by x would divide out, and so our answer at the top of the expression we have a 3, at the bottom of the expression we have 5x, and that's finished. So number 6, again we're going to start by breaking it down the same way. We're going to start by taking the denominator. It cannot be equal to 0. So I'm going to divide both sides by 8 to undo the multiply by 8, and we end up with x cannot be equal to 0. And there's part of our answer. Now we want to factor down the numbers, or the values of both expressions. So we've got 16x. I'm going to break down 16 to 4 times 4, and each 4 would break down to 2 times 2. So we end up with 4 2's. And we had 1x with that. In the denominator, we had 8 times x. 8 would break down to 4 times 2, and 4 would break down to 2 times 2. So we have 3 2's this time with a single x. When we look at what can divide out, we've got 2, we've got another pair of 2's, we've got another pair of 2's, we've got the x's, which leaves just the 2 at the top of the fraction. And at the bottom of the fraction, everything divided out. And so remember, when you divide something by itself, it's equal to 1. And then we've got 2 divided by 1 would just be 2. And that would be our final answer on that. So just taking a look at the rest of the problems now. Okay, so the expressions will get a little bit more complex as we go. So on number 7, we've got 28 divided by 12k minus 28. I'm going to start by finding my excluded value. So I'm going to do 12k minus 28 cannot equal 0. So I'm going to do plus 28 on each side. And we're left with 12 times k is equal to 28. I'm going to divide both sides by 12. And this is a fraction that we could simplify, so I'm going to divide top and bottom by 4, by the common factor of 4, which would make it 7 over 3. So in this case, k cannot be 7 over 3, or 2 1/3, or 2.33. I honestly want you to, or I prefer that you leave your answers as a fraction. So coming back to number 7, so 28, if we factor down 28 from the numerator, from the top of the fraction, we've got 4 times 7, and 4 would break down to 2 times 2. So at the top of the fraction, we have 2 times 2 times 7. Now the bottom expression, the denominator, was 12k minus 28. So I'm going to be looking for that greatest common factor. What could we divide both of these values by? And in this case, they both are divisible by 4, kind of like when we simplify the fraction. And if we divided 12k and negative 28 by 4, 12k divided by 4 would be 3k, negative 28 divided by 4 would be negative 7. And remember, when we factor, we need to think about what would have to be placed in front that could distribute into the parentheses and give us 12k minus 28 as an answer. So in this place, what do we need to multiply 3k by to change it back to 12k would be 4. And 4 times 7 would give us 28. So our divided value would be the 3k minus 7. Now 4 has been, the 3k minus 7 won't simplify, but 4 would break down to 2 times 2. So I'm going to go ahead and write this as 2 times 2 times 3k minus 7. Now we're going to look for what we can cancel out. The 2's would cancel out. Now I know we see a 7 at the top and a 7 at the bottom, but that 7 is grouped with this 3k. And since it's not 100% the same, it's slightly different because of that 3k minus, we cannot cancel it out. So the other half of our answer would be 7 at the top and 3k minus 7 in parentheses at the bottom. So because it was a group, we can't cancel it out. So going on to number 8. Number 8, we have 12x divided by 20x squared plus 40x. So with 12x, very similar to the question above, I'm going to break down 12 to 4 times 3 and 4 to 2 times 2. So our numerator is going to be 2 times 2 times 3 times x. And I'm sorry, I forgot to do something. We need to find our excluded value. The 20x squared plus 40x. Okay, so when I'm looking at that, I am going to be looking, so since I've got two different x's, I'm going to have to factor this. So what 20 and 40 both have in common is a 20, and they both have an x in common, so I'm going to divide out an x. And so 20 to x squared divided by 20x, 20 divided by 20 would be 1. X squared divided by x would leave us with 1x. Plus 40 divided by 20 would be 2. And the x's would divide out. And then we also need to put our greatest common factor in front, what we divided out of the expression, the 20x. Now once we have that, we're going to separate it into two expressions and solve each one. So 20 times x cannot be equal to 0. X plus 2 cannot equal 0. And we're going to solve each one. So I'm going to divide both sides by 20, which makes x not equal 0 divided by 20 would be 0. On the right side, I'm going to subtract 2. And we get x cannot be negative 2. So there are times where you do get more than one excluded value. Now, earlier, we already broke down the numerator. We already simplified the numerator, 12x to 2 times 2 times 3x. Now the denominator, just going to kind of point something out. We've already factored the denominator right here in blue. So I'm going to bring that over here. So we have 20x times x plus 2. Now kind of like 1 through 6, I'm going to take the 20x. I do want to simplify that a little bit farther. So 20x, I'm going to simplify that to 4 times 5. 4 breaks down to 2 times 2. So I'm going to replace the 20 with 2 times 2 times 5 times x. But we still have the x plus 2 that we cannot forget about. At the top of our fraction, we had 2 times 2 times 3 times x. I'm going to look for things that could divide out. 2 divided by 2, 2 divided by 2, x divided by x. Which leaves us with a 3 in the numerator and 5 parentheses x plus 2 in the denominator. So this part had 3 answers. It simplifies to 3 over 5x plus 2. X cannot be 0. X cannot equal negative 2. So 9, 10, 11, and 12 are actually a little bit shorter than the ones we've already done. Okay, so in 9, 10, 11, and 12, let's go ahead and start with number 9. Number 9 was the example from earlier. We're going to start by finding our excluded values. So we're going to take the denominator, x squared plus 5x plus 4. Cannot equal 0. I'm going to start by, solve this equation, I'm going to start by factoring it. So x squared breaks down to x times x. We're looking for factors of 4 that add to positive 5. Would be 4 and 1. I'm going to continue to break down the equation and separate it. So x plus 4 cannot equal 0. X plus 1 cannot equal 0. I'm going to subtract 4 on the left side, making x not equal to negative 4. I'm going to subtract 1 on the right side. X cannot equal negative 1. Now, on number 9, the numerator does not need to be factored. There's no factors of x and 1. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that the same, x plus 1. In the denominator, I already factored that. We already factored that to x plus 4 over x plus 1, or times x plus 1. And this time I see an actual expression that's exactly the same on the top and the bottom. I see x plus 1 at the top and bottom. So when I go to write my answer, I can see x plus 4 is at the bottom of the fraction. So I'm going to put my x plus 4 at the bottom. But when I've got anything, when I'm looking at the x plus 1 divided by x plus 1, anything divided by the same thing is equal to 1 when it cancels out. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 on top of the fraction. That x plus 4 has to stay in the denominator. So on number 10, same kind of idea. In the denominator, we have v plus 8. So to find our excluded value, we set it not equal to 0. Then we're going to solve, so I'm going to subtract 8 on both sides. And v cannot equal negative 8. Now the denominator we just saw when we solved it would just be v plus 8. And in the numerator, we're going to take the v squared. We're going to split that up into v times v. And factors of 16 that need to subtract and equal 6 I'm going to go with positive 8 minus 2. I'm going to look for the same thing that could divide out. So v plus 8 and v plus 8 would divide out, leaving us with v minus 2. And same idea as on number 9 would be at v minus 2 would be at the top, and we'd have a 1 at the bottom. And since we're dividing by 1, anything divided by 1 is just the same thing. Now, it really doesn't matter if you put parentheses or you don't on this question. Typically, if it just simplifies to something very simple like this, I won't put parentheses on it. Okay, so on number 11, we've got x squared minus 16x plus 60 divided by x squared minus 9x minus 10. Still have to start by finding our excluded values. So I'm going to take the x squared minus 9x minus 10. It cannot equal 0. So I'm going to factor the expression, which is going to help me later. Separate the x into x times x. And then I'm looking for two factors of 10 that subtract to equal negative 9. So I'm going to go with 1 minus 10. Because 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. 1 minus 10 is negative 9 in the center. So positive 1, negative 10. I'm going to separate the two factors. X plus 1 cannot equal 0. X minus 10 cannot equal 0. I'm going to solve each one. So minus 1 on each side, making it x cannot equal negative 1. And on the right side, I'm going to add 10 to both sides, meaning x cannot equal positive 10. So going back to the equation, to simplifying it, we've already factored the denominator factored to x plus 1 times x minus 10. So now I need to simplify the top. I need to factor the top. Now, one of the nice things about simplifying rational expressions is a lot of times we know something's going to divide out, and so we can use part of that as an answer. We can kind of use that to guide us to make sure we're going correctly on this. So when I'm starting to look for, when I take x squared and I separate it to x times x, and I'm looking for factors of 60 that add to 16, I know 10 is a factor of 60, and I know 10 times 6 would be 60, and 6 and 10 would add up to 16. But since it's a negative 16, I need these to be negatives here. So x minus 6, x minus 10. I'm going to look for what can divide out, the x minus 10s, which leaves us with x minus 6 over x plus 1. So number 12 is kind of tricky. It's more kind of like number 8 and number 7, where we had to look for common factors. So I'm going to start by taking the denominator, 14b plus 21, and that cannot be equal to 0. So I'm going to minus 21 on both sides, which leaves 14 times b is equal to negative 21. I'm going to divide both sides by 14. So b cannot be equal to. Now this fraction, it can divide both the top and the bottom of the fraction by 7, which makes it negative 3 over 2. So there's part of our answer. The excluded value on this would be b cannot be negative 3 over 2. Now, going back to the actual expression itself, we need to factor both the numerator and the denominator. So at the top, 49b minus 14, what could we divide what could we take out of both 49 and 14? We can divide those by 7. And if I divide out a 7 from that, that leaves 7b minus 2. In the denominator, just like when we reduced the fraction, 14b and 21 could both be divided by 7. So I'm going to go ahead and divide out the 7. And if I do so, 14b divided by 7 would be 2b, and 21 divided by 7 would be 3. I'm going to look for what is exactly the same. The entire factor that's entirely the same would be the 7. 7 divided by 7 would be 1 and cancel out. So our final answer on this would be 7b minus 2 over 2b plus 3. And b cannot be equal to negative 3 over 2. Anyways, that's it for the teacher-guided problems. If you have any questions, please let me know as soon as you can. Hope you all are doing great. I hope your families are doing well. I look forward to hearing from you guys as much as you can possibly spare. Okay, have a great day, have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Peace.